So, hello everyone. It's Sascha here, and I have the pleasure of chatting with Yotam Gutman again, and
Hi, Sasha.
really happy. Hello. It's an introduction. I wanted also tell you, Yotam is the marketing director at SentinelOne. So I think also belated congratulations are in order for that.
Thank you.
So well done. So you're based at the moment in Israel, right? And was it Tel Aviv?
Yes, correct. We have a big R&D facility and product with about 200 people here, an additional 400 people spread across the US, Western Europe, and Asia Pacific. And we're growing rapidly. So it's a big operation.
Fantastic. So tell me in one quick sentence about what SentinelOne is all about.
Well, SentinelOne used to be a leader in endpoint security, but what we're doing now is a radical shift. We're moving from the endpoint to cloud security, to IoT security. We're kind of doing an overall of our entire offering to encompass the entire enterprise. So it's very exciting times for us.
Great. So we've already had, it's 2020, it's a new decade. I know there's a lot of buzz and a lot of talk about different things in security, but I want to get your insights into what do you think. I mean, we've had attacks, especially last year in the United States, going after a lot of the municipal and government offices, especially across the United States, really. Already this year, we've recently had the attack on the Austrian Foreign Ministry. There was a breach there. So how do you see this? Are we going to experience more breaches and attacks on government, or is this finally going to be the year where maybe the good guys start to prevent some of these attacks?
Sadly, I'm not very optimistic. I think that you highlighted two of the major trends of 2019, and they're going to continue in full steam towards the next decade or so. The first, as you mentioned, is cybercrime epidemic, and its most notable representative, the ransomware. The second is nation state or advanced persistent threat kind of campaigns, or APT. Nations targeting other nations. That's also going to escalate, I think, throughout the year. And the third point is kind of a result of these two activities is that major data dumps are being released, and this constitutes a major threat to people's privacy. And that's just in a year where a new privacy law has been enacted in California, the CCPA. The GDPR is going for a year and a half now almost. So we'll be seeing, on one hand, more activity, more casualties or victims, but on the other hand, we'll be seeing bigger fines from the company. So if I were to be an enterprise at this day and age, I would be frightened. So I'm definitely gonna be hit harder, and I'll have people coming after me, both the public and the regulators.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're talking about there'll be a squeeze basically on some companies, based as you said, from the public and as well as from the government. So also one thing in looking towards the future, and last year we saw more of this already develop. We're looking at a kind of rivalry, a geopolitical element, more and more to technology standards, as you mentioned already with California, and then also the EU leading the way with GDPR. Is that ultimately going to be a good thing for consumers and businesses and their security and data?
So I'll look at it in two different aspects. First of all, is cyber is now officially another domain where warfare is being carried out. It has been once, at least since 2010, since Stuxnet. The US has officially enacted a cyber command, and we're now seeing virtual cyber blows being exchanged between US and Iran, according or following the recent events in the Middle East. So that's one thing that we're seeing. I think that paradoxically, this is kind of a good thing because it allows these very high-strung battles to be conducted in a kind of a sterile, less impact environment. I would rather have the US and Iran exchange cyber attacks than exchanging missiles, perhaps even nuclear missiles. So that's definitely happening, and this will escalate. We're not entirely sure how this will play out. If you like to roll the tape back to the early 60s, we're just like in the early days of the Cold War now. We have several countries that have very ample capabilities. They can use them to shut down other countries, and they will suffer some sort of retaliation. So until this thing is kind of settled in international politics and diplomatic channels, we're stomping on new ground, and everyone's hesitating on how to react. All the attacks we've seen so far are very carefully conducted, not to get the other side too angry. The thing that is difficult for us, consumers or citizens, is that there's no such thing as a clean cyber blow. If I were to shut down a power station of an Arabian country, obviously it's better to do it with cyber than to demolish it with bombs, but the results will be similar all the same. I would lose power supply, I will hurt the country's economy, the welfare of its people. And we've seen other activities which go about it the other way. We've seen North Korea, heavily sanctioned, cash-starved. So they are using cyber criminals, and actually they're outsourcing this activity to Eastern Europe. This is something that we discovered in Sentinel Labs, our research body. They actually produce very capable cyber tools. They then sell or list them or have some sort of commercial agreement with Eastern European hackers. These guys rack up the funds and they pay some of the money back to North Korea, which helps it fund its other activities. So we see nation state playing in the cyber field, both on the diplomatic level, on the cybercrime level. We've seen it between Russia and Ukraine on a subversion or political level. So there's really no clear limits here, and everyone's affected.
Mm-hmm. Interesting point when you mentioned about these cyber criminals and the work that's being outsourced to Eastern Europe. I think we have to be clear that Eastern Europe is a wide region. You have some really great companies and individuals there. So probably you're referring to probably elements of Russia, maybe Belarus, maybe parts of Ukraine, but it's probably spread out through various regions there.
I mean, that's another challenge. First of all, I mean, it's easy to fall down to. I mean, I'm a result of the older regime, if you like to call. I still remember the Cold War, the division between East and West. In the cyber world, this is absolutely meaningless. People can operate and inflict very painful attacks from just about anywhere in the world. The other thing that makes it even more challenging is that attribution is almost impossible. Mm-hmm. I could potentially launch a cyber strike from here in Israel using a server in China on a target in the US to make it appear like the Chinese are now targeting the US. It would be very difficult for someone to actually decipher and uncover this. Mm-hmm. So the lack of clarity here is a big part, and I think that's why everyone is so careful. You can never know really who you're playing against.
Yeah, always be vigilant. Now, last year we had, unfortunately, as this carries on, some insider attacks, especially from cybersecurity companies. Like I remember, for instance, at the end of the year, I think it was Palo Alto Networks. We had someone on the inside actually doing some damage, and then I think for the industry as a whole and its reputation, that wasn't good for us security vendors and security folks. So how do you perceive this for 2020 in the future? Because we're trying to always reinforce that insider threats are usually at companies, but now we've seen them actually at security companies. So I think the public and certain corporate stakeholders will be a little bit worried. So what's your take on that for next year or this year?
So first of all, I mean, you've said it. It's been proven that it could be done by just about anyone. It could be done by someone from your company. It could be someone from your supply chain. It could be malicious or non-malicious. A lot of companies and entities have aided in cyber criminal activities without their knowledge. But the malicious insider is something that's always been very challenging to identify. I think the way that companies, I mean, I'm talking about the big enterprise, we work with Fortune 10 enterprises, the top 3 of them. And the way they work is that they seldom, outsource anything outside. Even if they buy a product, they are very hands-on. They have close communication with the teams that are monitoring these products. So it's going to be very difficult to manipulate this machine. I'm not saying that it's impossible, but the way that big organizations work is they don't offload anything in terms of responsibility. And I think that's the best practice. Obviously, it's harder for a small organization, and they should, demand from their vendors, to show them their logs, to conduct audits, to have regular update calls, whatever is necessary to build this trust. And again, no matter what we do, we've seen it with espionage. We've seen people at the top of the CIA who are spies for Cuba for many centuries. I mean, the best organization has fallen prey to insider, but you should be vigilant and you should try, to have ways to identify this before they create the damage.
Mm-hmm. And if you're looking ahead as well for 2020, which industry and which sector do you find is going to be the most vulnerable to internal and external threats?
Well, I think we've seen it throughout 2019. I sadly I don't see any reason for it to stop. I think municipalities and anything that they encompass. I mean, it includes educational facilities and healthcare. But I'm talking about the municipal level, not the private, corporate, or government. I think they're going to be the hardest hit because by now they've completed their digital transformation. So everything is online, but they don't have the know-how. They usually don't have the resources to secure their infrastructure in the same way that a bank could. And sadly, they don't have the mechanism to alert them when something goes wrong. So what we've seen with places like Baltimore and very recently New Orleans, I think sadly this is just the beginning. We see that this was the sector that was hardest hit throughout the year. And I think, by the way, I don't think that hackers are intentionally targeting this sector. I mean, a lot of the activities are automatic in the way that the attacks are being formulated. But since these entities have such large attack servers, they're bound to get hit. And what we've seen, I think in the second half of 2019, is that hackers, they used to go through phishing emails. You have to click a link or download an attachment. They've bypassed that. They're going through automatic protocols like RDP. They find open port. They use very aggressive tool like Mimikatz that literally burst the servers with thousands of requests and try to crack the passcodes. So although we're getting better at improving the human aspects, I think in that case, the automation will leave us behind. And there's a big mismatch between the firepower that you can have as a hacker operating 1,000 machines and a security team at a municipality. So sadly, I think that's what we're going to be seeing a lot more of in 2020.
So it will get worse before it gets any better, essentially.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, with what you mentioned earlier, with what's happening now as of January 1st in California with the new law in place about data protection, privacy, what's your take? Do you think by the end of the year, I know we've got elections in the US, but do you think maybe by the end of the year, other US states will have followed in line with California? Or will we even maybe see a federal privacy law as we have in Europe with GDPR?
So I think we have a good test case in the sense of how states address data breach notification. There are, I think, close to 50 different data breach notification laws in the US, and there is not a federal data notification breach law. So I think it will stay on the state side. I think most states will follow California's lead. I don't think we'll see anything more radical than that because it's quite comprehensive. And I'm not sure you have to have a nationwide, privacy law at that stage. You do have to have them for sector, and that's something that we've been seeing for a long time with the HIPAA regulation, with SEC regulation. I think that's the way to go. Select the sectors where privacy or data security matters most, make sure that they're regulated, and then let the states decide for themselves if they want a 48 our notification 72. I think what's important that the law is there and it's being enforced. Okay, so I think this is a good sign. It's good that the US is now on par with the EU and on most subject, and given that this is the best or the biggest market in the world, most of the world will follow suit as well. I think that's one positive thing that we can take from our conversation, is that nations are now taking privacy and data security much more seriously, and they're also ready to enforce it. We've seen some hefty fines, especially in the UK, where the regulator just fined Dixon's car phones. That's a large retailer of cellular phones. I think they were fined £500,000 for a data breach. I think that's a good sign, and we'll probably be seeing more high-profile breaches and high-profile fines as well.
Mm-hmm. Great. So a lot of information, but let's finish off with your two main trends, or let's say main areas for 2020 that are important for the info and cybersecurity community. What are the main threats going to be, or maybe even one threat and one opportunity, something good. Let's balance it on good and on negative.
So I'll cover them both with one item, and that's actually something that's going today. Today, Microsoft is going to announce, according to some people, a very big security glitch in one of their operating systems, most likely Windows 2017, which coincidentally is been decommissioned today.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest threat is out-of-date software. Mm-hmm. We've seen it with the expiry of Windows XP several years ago. We've seen a lot of data breaches that exploited old and unpatched software. So that's the pain point and also the opportunity, because it's easier to keep Microsoft updates on time than to buy entire security apparatus. Mm-hmm. So if you cover that corner, I mean, you gain a lot of security with minimal effort. I mean, that's just IT best practice, okay? Keeping software up to date. Mm-hmm. So if you do that, you save yourself a world of pain. And in addition, you have to, get yourself ready for battle with all the other bad stuff that's going on. But don't stand there vulnerable using old software. Yeah, there's no excuse for that anymore.
As you said, it's a basic practice. So everyone, keep everything patched and updated. So we'll see which way it swings, and opportunity or more of the disaster zone. So Yotam, thank you so much for your time. Always great to chat with you and get your insights.
My pleasure. Thank you, Sascha. Goodbye.